Like sands through the hourglass, these are the last days of our lives. Terran saying, age of paranoia. The shipboard technician was on his back, staring at the ceiling, his neck slits fluttering as he breathed, his 3 eyes glassy and focused. Fului moved past him, staying out of reach as best he could with how narrow the passageway was. The tech didn't even react to Fui's presence, just kept steadily breathing. The atmosphere was at the correct pressure. Just the oxygen content was too low for anyone without a breathing mask or supplemental tank to stay fully conscious. The door to the boardroom bridge was shut, but Fui used the mechanical system to open it. Inside, the industry flotilla board was scattered around the room. Some were slumped over in chairs, others were on the floor, still others were slumped over consoles. Fui could see the chief flotilla executive officer was unconscious in his board of directors throne, head leaned forward, neck slits fluttering. Fui moved into the room, feeling those grains of sand slip away from the hourglass he could practically visualize in his mind. It took him 3 circuits of the boardroom bridge to find what he was looking for. The tech was not a bad person, Fui knew that, so he carefully removed the other Ch.35 gently onto the floor, arranging them so they wouldn't wake up in pain. He sat down in the chair and looked at the menu. The system was open, but the timer only had 5 minutes. Fui clicked on the button to tell the system he was there, then started bringing up menus. It took even more time to find what he wanted. He had to walk over and put the chief flotilla executive officer's palm on the scanner to access it. Then he had to wait for what seemed to be forever for the computer to consult with the other ships and even the research cubicles. Finally, it beeped that everything was connected. It took 4 tries, the grains of sand still slipping away, but finally he managed to do it. He reset the atmosphere, using the chief flotilla executive officer's authority, dropping the O2, raising the CO and nitrogen so that the crews and researchers and scientists wouldn't be aware of what was happening. One system refused to be reset. Fui looked it over and fluted nervously. The demo frogs system refused to recognize any authority. The computer could only report the status. It was unable to affect anything in the demo frogs base, which was on manual and local control only. Fui just hoped that the demo frogs had not succumbed to the powers of the servant of Narvoka. The thought of what 8 unrepentant murderers could do if they were in the thrall of the servant of Narvoka made his 3 stomachs hurt. Moving to the next part of his plan, he put the demo frogs out of his mind. As he ordered the ships to execute a non-vacuum damage control test and seal all doors, take all non-board computers out of any local commands, and engage station-keeping engines only, he just hoped that the demo frogs weren't rampaging on the surface. I have to save them. Please let me save them, he thought as he worked feverishly with the unfamiliar system. Vractarakla felt it as whole swaths of the servitors in orbit went unconscious, their brain functions dipping below what anesthetic or sleep would bring. He could tell most of them, their brains had moved to survival functions only. No matter. He had to deal with the power he had, not the amount of power he wanted. The chamber he was in was still a problem. Despite the fact the lemurs were long dead, he could still feel simmering echoes of their rage and fury from their armor, from their weapons. They actively resisted any attempts at Vrak using his formidable powers to shift the wreckage, forcing him to actually lower himself to the floor and use his hands to push the armor away. Like a peasant. Any phasic construct still melted or crumbled touching the lemur armor. Worse, it made it so that Vrak could hear the lemur's war cries in him memories, the way the last of them had swarmed the chamber of thought and mastery, the way they'd been nothing more than a rampant need to kill and destroy as they'd shattered the protective constructs and taken the fight directly to the powerful and ancient Atrekna in the chamber. Vrak knew that whatever was coming was able to resist his commands, able to throw off his attempts at controlling them. When he reached out, all he found was madness and anger rapidly approaching, missing the smooth, warm consistency of servitor thought patterns. Another defensive construct, hurriedly created, collapsed with a bright spark. Closer. Vrak set to getting ready. The lemurs, or the inheritors of madness, whichever they were coming, and Vrak would kill them. "How is he?" we asked, using hand signals. The frog priest looked up and used one hand to sign the answer. "Wounded, but still able to fight." The demo frog gave a thumbs up, his hand smeared with pinkish blood from where he'd held his own guts in after the crystalline weapon had hit him with 2 shards of phasic energy that had manifested as pointed pink crystals. "Good man," we signed, then clapped his hand on the shoulder of the demo frog who was sitting against the wall. The pressure bandage and wound packing hidden by the spray sealant that the frog priest had used to restore the demo frog's suit integrity. The frog priest helped the wounded demo frog up as we returned to the front of the staggered line, counting in his men. He had not lost any, but 3 were wounded. 1 with phasic crystal shrapnel that had vanished right after it had damaged the demo frog's leg. The other missing 2 fingers from their left hand from where a crystal had just snapped them off like a pea pod. The last was the worst, but the crystalline construct had appeared after half of the demo frogs had already passed. At least it only fired 1 shot, we thought to himself as he gave the silent command to move out. He jogged forward, still feeling like time was slipping away, that he needed to hurry. He could almost feel the sand trickling through the hourglass to be lost forever. He had no idea why he was on such a tight timetable, but he could feel it. They rounded a corner, we in the lead, every demo frog holding their weapon ready. A barrier of crystalline appearing phasic energy appeared, cutting off the corridor. 1 appeared behind the last demo frog. We moved forward, pulling around his pack. With 2 others, he quickly set up the charges, the main charge in the center. It was some kind of energy, but it had substance, had physical form, which meant it could be destroyed. All of the demo frogs turned away from the crystalline appearing barrier when we flashed the hand sign for "Fire in the hole." There was a loud crack sound, then the sound of shattering glass. The phasic construct was gone, and the demo frogs hustled down the hallway, hurrying toward where they could feel some kind of vile ethereal tentacles emanating from. They could feel the commands to stop, to kneel, to bow, to submit, to surrender. But none of them were willing. They held tight to their anger, their rage. They replayed every slight, every insult, every ego injury. Every time they were denied something, or someone else denied something, they hammered it into iron that they used to guard themselves. Finally they reached the last corner. 4 more ambushes, only 1 more injury, and that was one of the frog priests twisting a hawk, diving out of the way of a phasic construct that exploded at waist height just a bare few seconds too late. The phasic shrapnel had slashed out into the corridor, but the demo frogs had dove underneath the plane of attack, and the purplish-pink shrapnel had shattered on the walls. We gave the signal, and the frog priests went to work. 1 moved to we, kneeling down next to the demo frog leader. The priest used his key to open the panel on Wee's forearm. The priest then removed a vial from a pouch at his waist, gave it a quick silent blessing, and slotted it into the revealed mechanism. He repeated it twice more, making sure all 3 vials were seated properly. The frog priest at the back did the same to the rearmost demo frog. The priests moved to the next demo frog and went to work. We stared at the closed and locked panel. We cannot allow the weakness of the body to cause us to fail our mission, he thought. Our lives do not matter. It is mission first, and if we must die to accomplish it, then that is the price every demo frog is willing to pay. He closed his eyes and gave a brief prayer to Narvoka itself. Whatever happens here, let my people endure, he asked. He opened his eyes at the tap on the shoulder. He looked up and the frog priest nodded, holding a rocket launcher in his hands. Unlike other rocket launchers used by the defense industry, The one the frog priest was holding was so simple as to be primitive. Not a single electronic. An extendable metal tube that had a simple visual sight pop up when the tube was deployed. Solid rocket fuel, an inverted osmium disc, a mechanical trigger and mechanical fuse. It was frighteningly primitive, yet excellently designed and effective. Ready. We signed. All 5 demo frogs and the 2 priests gave the hand signals they were ready. We pointed with 2 fingers, giving 2 sharp dips with the fingers. Move out. We finished making sure the reactors on all the ships and any other reactor that could be reached via the board controls were on automatic, unable to be run or altered by anyone local except to shut it down. He got up twice to move to the wall and smash his face against it until the slimy feeling other thoughts were banished from his mind. He knew he was bleeding from at least 3 pressure cuts. His nose was clogged with coagulated blood. One eye was nearly swollen shut. He could taste blood in his mouth. That didn't matter. The only thing that mattered was the fact he could repeat, "Get out, get out, get out," over and over as he smashed his face against the wall until the intrusive thoughts retreated from his mind. But the reactors, the life support, the gravity, and all of the methods to open the ships to vacuum were out of anyone else's hands. Yes, it would require engineers to do a hard reset on the equipment, in some cases shut it down and load new firmware or software, but he had done it. He hoped. Fui went to get up when he saw an icon flash on the DCC board he was using. He tapped it and the headset he was wearing crackled. "Please tell me you're sane." The voice was female, fluting slightly with anxiety. "Yes," Fui said. "I'm at the DCC station in the pride of Narvoka's gift." "Where are you?" she asked. "I'm on the flagship, at the DCC station in the boardroom command center," Fui answered. He paused a second. "Why didn't the thoughts affect you?" "What thoughts? What is happening?" the female asked. "The scientists found a servant of Narvoka, still alive. It's attacking us. Some kind of telepathic assault. It gets in your head," Fui said. There was silence a moment. "I was in the infirmary. Traumatic brain injury. I'm a molecular circuitry researcher specializing in great enemy molluscs. I was working on a great enemy power armor helmet when the circuitry came on. The doctor said I suffered a phasic injury," she said. "I woke up to everyone rubbing their faces on the decks. Then everyone passed out." "How come you didn't?" Fui asked. "I was on oxygen. I carried the tank with me to DCC. What's going on?" "The DCC board says the atmosphere is bad, but I can't change the settings," the female said. "I locked everyone out. They were sacrificing our crewmates to the servant. I had to stop them, but I didn't want to hurt anyone," Fui said. He gave a low fluting noise of distress. "Please, don't change the atmosphere." "I can't," the female said. There was a long silence. "I'm researcher first class Shwavi Me, defense industry, Psi Research Subdivision. Ship systems repair technical specialist first class Fuilui He, defense and transportation industrials, Stellar Vessel Subdivision," Fui answered. "What's going to happen? What if the servant somehow gets to Narvoka's gift and attacks our people?" Schwa asked. Fui cringed slightly. He'd thought of that and already made his decision. "Then I blow up the ships so it can't," he said. He waited for her to call him crazy, to say what he was doing was madness. The silence stretched out. "I have a spouse and 4 children," she said softly.
"I'm sorry."
"I can't let that matter," Fui said, fluting low miserable tones. "I'll blow up the ships to prevent the servant from reaching home." There was more silence. "Thank you." The burning pain behind his third eye made Vraktarakla cringe slightly as it brought up the last defense. just touching the armor of the mad lemurs of terror, ravaged his psychic senses, assaulted his intellect fortress, crashed against his thought shields, hammered on the towers of his iron will. It brought back memories of the horrific clash that had left him the sole survivor. At least the hibernation crystal had healed his wounds. Setting up the last offensive system, Vrak held back some of his power for personal defense. During his long life in the old universe, and the one before that, he had never been forced to defend himself personally from an enraged physical attack. Against psychic assaults, sure. Against intricate and complex plots, yes. Vrak glared at the suit of armor against one wall. That one. That lemur. That lemur in particular. That fucking lemur. It had dared assault his person physically. Screaming at him, half of its helmet ripped away, the flesh torn from its face to reveal the bloody skull beneath, one eye socket an empty pit, an arm missing, the chest plating shattered, the internals of the armor gouged away, to reveal bloody ribs and organs beneath. And it had still run, screaming, across the chamber of thought and mastery, to furiously assault Vrak even as it bled its life away. Vrak hated that lemur in particular. A small part of him craved enough power to reach back in time and bring forth that lemur so he could kill it again and again and again. If it was not for his skill, his mastery, of the art of the psychic blade, the lemur would have killed him. Even when Vrak had impaled the lemur on the blade of pure psionic energy, the lemur had somehow grabbed the psychic manifestation and pulled itself forward, pulling a grenade off of its harness with the intent of blowing them both up. Luckily, it had expired and Vrak had flung it against the far wall in case the grenade had been armed. Vrak could see that the lemur still held the grenade tightly in its dead hand, could see the OD green paint, the purple and yellow bands around the orb, see the pin still in the grenade. The Atrekna stared at the suit of armor. It didn't matter that even the bones were long gone, even the dust from the bones was gone. That fucking lemur had been inside that armor and had assaulted him with its filthy appendages. I hate you, Vrak thought at the armor. His anger was redirected when Vrak felt the phasic barriers snap into place. He hummed to itself in slight anxiety. They were close, closer than before. He could feel their anger, their desire to commit murder, to kill and maim. Their thoughts were screams of defiance, not like the lemur's roars that could be heard across star systems, but still defiance. Vrak thought about heading down the passageways to see what foes he faced, even started to move forward. The barrier suddenly collapsed as an explosive detonated against it. Vrak was too weak to shore up the barrier against an explosive-shaped charge that had been placed properly. Checking his jewelry, Vrak moved to the rear of the chamber, lifting himself up slightly off the floor on a disk of phasic energy so that he was in the center of the rear wall. He ensured his personal protections would activate with the speed of thought, that his weapons were ready to be brought into existence and used against whoever it was that dared assault his majesty. He used precious phasic energy to bring up a one-way barrier in the middle of the room that would protect him. It would turn lasers and coherent energy into harmless rainbows, stop phasic munitions, even stop the lemur's preferred antimatter kinetic munitions for a short time. Let them come. I killed their ancestors. I will kill them, Vrak thought. Then I will have the servitors dig me out, and I will leave this disgusting place. I will gather together any other survivors, and we will make this universe kneel before us. We looked back, checking his men. They were all tense beneath their armor. Their faces were hidden by their visors, but he knew they all had determined expressions. The two demo frogs with the grenade launchers loaded rounds at Wee's hand signal, one with high-explosive/dual purpose, the other with high-explosive white phosphorus. Willie Pete hated everyone and would burn even if water was poured on it. The two with the light machine guns checked their weapons and signaled back they were ready. We looked at the two frog priests. one with the rocket launcher, the other with a rifle where each round was engraved with a symbol of the great enemy that caused such fear in Ch.35, who viewed them. Prayer strips adorned with symbols of the great enemy, from the 3 pillars of doom to the yellow oval with a stripe and animal head, were wound around the rifle. Each round was blessed, the tungsten steel core of the round micro-etched with symbols of the great enemy. They had been prepared just in case the servant of Narvoka turned out to be a great deceiver. We nodded at his men. One by one they nodded back. He tensed. It would be around the corner and 3 steps to where the great double doors had been smashed inward. We knew, without quite knowing how, that his demo frogs would be engaged in combat before they made those 3 steps. Fingers on the trigger. Safety's off. Engage at will, he hand-signaled. They all nodded. He held up his fist and pumped it 3 times. He extended 3 fingers and then folded one down. Then another. Then the last. He broke around the corner, weapon already up, his eyes seeking out and spotting the false servant. His finger tightened on the trigger. Vrak saw it come around the corner. A servitor, in armor, a psychic shield around each mind that still snarled with hatred and the desire to murder. He lashed out with his power. "Will you stay on the line with me?" Fui asked. "Yes," Schwa answered.
I'm glad.
"Me too."